We're now on the top of Daf Dalid Amid Beis, and we're about to read the Gemara of my Ovidla. But first, let's just understand that the Gemara had just established that if the guy brings monies for a carbon, and some of those monies in one way or the other will eventually be used for the Beis HaMikdash, we can do such a thing. And that's how we understood it according to Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, but ma ovidla Reb Shimon Lakish. This answer, this explanation, is not going to fit into the view of Reb Shimon ben Lakish, because he says you're not allowed to be makabel from a nachri, whether it's bein betchila, bein betzof, or v'suyim, bein hashem, all that we discussed in Amud Aleph. So what difference does it make what the nachri knows or what he doesn't know? According to Rabbi Lakish, monies of a guy cannot be used for a mikdash. Period. It's mom and nachri, big kinyana. That money cannot be used for the Beis HaMikdash. So what are you going to tell me? Well, he had the right intentions. He thought he was bringing a carbon, but you're taking his money and you're using it for the Beis HaMikdash. Reish Lakish is an absolute prohibition under all circumstances. We don't take money from a nachri and use it for the Beis HaMikdash. Pasar le, so Reish Lakish says, on this I have a drush. Now here Reish Lakish backtracks a little bit from his original extreme opinion. The pasuk in the 4th chapter of Ezra says, Lo lachem v'lonu livnos bayis l'Elokeinu. In other words, we're not allowed to take from the nachri when the nachri comes to take pride in the fact that he gave an adava for the Beis HaMikdash. But if the nachri doesn't know about it at all, he's not aware of the fact that his nadav is going for the Beis HaMikdash, he thinks he's bringing a carbon, then it's okay to accept his money, even according to Reish Lakish. And we derive this from the pasuk, Lo lachem v'lanu. You want to boast that you built the Beis HaMikdash, we're not going to allow you to do that. And Ezra says we exclude your karma. When Ezra is building the Beis HaMikdash, he will exclude the contributions of a god. But in a case where he doesn't come forward to be mispoyer and be proud and glorify himself by saying, I contributed to the Jewish, holy temple, but rather he's interested in bringing a carbon, that's a different story. And even Reish Lakish would say, we accept his carbon. And what happens with the monies that he paid into the pushka here for the carbon, and some of the monies will be surplus and earmarked for a klishares, that's okay. Reb Chizkiya Amar Reb Simon Shal. Remember we said yesterday that the word Shal in Yushalmi means Amar. Me'ata, if we're dashing the pasuk Lo lachem v'lanu livnos beis l'Elokeinu, which means we're not going to accept gifts from the nachri for bedek habayis, is therefore, you know what? Based on this pasuk, I'm going to go even a step further. I'm going to say that we're not going to accept contributions from the goyim, even to build the roads of Israel, even to build the chutzos Yerushalayim, ein mekablim hem liyamas mayim, even to dig a well or a gutter or some cistern that we want to dig for the purpose of water, even to build the walls around the holy city of Jerusalem and its migdalim, its tower. We don't accept them, because let's read a pasuk that's written in that context. When Ezra, together with Nehemiah, in Aliyah Shniya, they built the Beis HaMikdash, it says, Shemar, and we'll read the whole pasuk. It says, Lachem ein chelek utstaka v'zikaron b'Yerushalayim. We're not going to accept gifts from the Nachrim and the Dava, even for the sake of building Yerushalayim. Now the Mishnah says, Elu chayov b'kalman. And it seems that when you're chayev in a machzah shekel, you're automatically ipso facto chayev in hosafa to add a kalbon. Says the Gemara, Masnisa de Rabbi Meir. This absolute requirement that whenever you're chayev in machzah shekel, ipso facto you're chayev in a kalbon, that seems to reflect the sheet of Rabbi Meir. Meaning, forget about what we discussed, that in order to make exchange, you have to go to the money changer and there's a commission, and that's why the kalbon has to be added to cover the commission so the hegdish doesn't lose anything. Leave that all out. Forget about the money changes. Let him bring a machzah shekel bidyuk, exact change as we call it. He still has to pay a kalbon. Why? Because that's Rabbi Meir. That the Torah required not just the machzah shekel, but an additional payment of a kalb. Masnisa de Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah reflects the sheet of Rabbi Meir. The Yomer Rabbi Meir keshem sheshiklu. Torah, just like the Torah established the chiyuv of machzah shekel, kakablono Torah. So too the Torah added an additional obligation to pay a kalbon. Because Kasam Rabbi Meir, the no saying shiklo sholeh, meaning even if he gives exact change and there's no need for employing the money changer, the Torah was Machayim Kalb. Yomer Rabbi Meir. What led Rabbi Meir to this position, which often seems strange, that the Torah obligated a person to bring together with his machzah shekel an additional payment of a kalbon? Moshe Rabbeinu had trouble with this machzah shekel. He didn't know exactly what the Ribono Shalom had in mind when he obligated machzah shekel, because Baruch Hu showed him a vision of a beautiful machzah shekel. It was a matbeah shel eish, a very miraculous kind of a coin. Now, the word eish here in this context has a specific meaning, because when you have metals in their natural state before you refine them, they're full of sigim, which are in English called impurities. You have to remove those impurities, and then you get pure gold, pure silver, etc. The matbeah shel eish means that the matbeah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him, which was a machzah shekel, was already refined by the fire, and all the impurities were removed. If that be the case, says Rabbi Meir, we have a problem. Because in the modern currency, and even in Rabbi Meir's time, when you got a hold of a machzah shekel, it was not a matbeah shel eish. It had impurities in it. They didn't bother removing all the impurities when they minted the coin. So therefore, the Torah says Rabbi Meir wanted to make up the difference, the increment between our matbeos, call it a machzah shekel, and the matbeah shel eish that was shown to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said, because they yitnu, that's what they have to give. So to make up the difference, there's a certain element of devaluation here, because our gold coins, silver coins, have impurities in them. So the machzah shekel has an impurity in it. It's not refined, it's not pure machzah shekel, and therefore make up the difference by adding a kalb. Now the Mishnah says, Nosan sela litol shekel chayev shnei kulbonos. So a man comes forward to pay up his dues of machzah shekel, and he has a sela. A sela is twice machzah shekel. And the Mishnah says he has to pay 2 kilbonos. Kaviyachal, one for the exchange so that he can get back change, meaning a machzah shekel, so, offset the fee, the commission of the money changer. And secondly, we're going to impose upon him another kalbon because the gizbar himself has to change and this sela into 2 into 2 machzios. So it's almost as if the Hegdesh is paying twice. It's paying once in order to give a machzah shekel to the change to the shokel, and it's paying another time in order to get its machzah shekel from the seller. Of Rabbi Lazar to Rabbi Meir. This Mishnah is a hemshech of the previous quote of Rabbi Meir, who says that the Torah imposed, in addition to the machzah shekel, a kalmon fee to make up the difference between a matbeh shalish and our matbeh. So therefore, Rabbi Meir, even before you go to the exchange rate, the money changer, you still have to pay a kalmon. Even had you given exact change of machzah shekel, you still have to pay a kalmon because our machzah shekel is not equal to the refined machzah shekel by matbeh shalish and Moshe. Now, in addition, you gave him a selah, and now we have to go to the money changer. So you have to pay chiluf and add another kalmon. That's Rabbi Meir. But according to Chachamim, they never accepted this matbeh shalish story. They only require an additional payment of a kalmon, which is not mentioned in the Torah at all, or even alluded to in the Torah, in order to offset the fee of the money changer. And the fee of the money changer here is 1 kalmon. Why does the Mishnah say 2 kalmonos? The answer is because the Mishnah is reflecting Rabbi Meir. Tisanya, and Rabbi Eliezer brings the brisa to support his opinion. Elu chayovim bekalmon. We're talking about a case of a person who gave a selah and he gets back a shekel in change. Kalmon echad. Tanakami in this brisa says he only pays 1 kalmon. Rabbi Meir, the brisa quotes, so you see that our Mishnah that says that he pays 2 kilbonos reflects the sheet of Rabbi Meir. And I thought the sugi would end right here. It's like hands down. No. Mar Rav, we have a statement of Rav against Rabbi Lazar, and he says, Divrei Akoli, this Mishnah reflects a unanimous opinion and can be reconciled even with the Tanakama, who would agree that in this case, you pay 2 kilbonos. And why is that? Well, one is Demei Pirut, Pirut meaning Prita or Chiluf, if you want to use the word. For the Machzis HaShekel that he received as change, and another kalmon he has to pay, even according to the Tanakama of Rabbi Meir, because a person who gives him a te'ah, which is not a Machzis HaShekel, he's got to add a kalmon. Maybe because, as we said before, the Gizbar doesn't want to get stuck with a Machzis HaShekel. Machzis HaShekel is a small coin, relatively, so he wants to exchange it for a larger coin, and therefore he's going to have to pay a money changer again. So he has to pay the money changer once in order to supply the shokel, the nosei, with change of a Machzis HaShekel. He has to pay another fee or commission to the money changer in order to take the Machzis HaShekel he's left with and convert it into larger currencies. Alternatively, you could explain the Gemara saying, Rav, that the reason for the other additional kalbon is because of hechreya. Remember, we mentioned Rashi in Masechet Bechoros, and Rashi gave in the name of Yeshomer an interpretation that the kalbon is because of hechreya. Hechreya means that you're never sure exactly what value you're giving. As you count out the money, there may be discrepancies, devaluations, inflation, depression, whatever it might be. So to make up the difference, you always add a kalmon. So there's 1 kalmon that has to be given by the shokel, even in a case where he gave exact change. That's called the payment of hachreya. And then on top of that, in a case where he gave him a full selah and he wants change for half a shekel, then he has to add another kalmon for the payment of a commission to the shulchani, to the chadvani who does the exchange. Comes along Rabbi Meir and he adds a 3rd kalmon. to make up the difference between the Matbeah Shel Eish of Moshe and our Machzah Shekel. The Yomer Rabbi Meir, this is where Rav was forced to interpret this. He says, the Yomer Rabbi Meir, Echad Shakal, Echad Shekel Shehu Nosein, the Echad Shekel Shehu Notein, the Echad L'Divrei Torah. Rabbi Meir actually lists 3 different kalbonos. One kalbon is for the shekel that he gave, and I guess we could interpret that as the hachrea concept, perhaps. So he didn't give an exact change of a machzah shekel, he gave a shekel. Echad shekel shu notel. Not only that, he's getting a half a shekel back in change, because he didn't have exact change. So for that, he has to pay an additional kalbon. And the third kalbon is the doraisa kalbon, because our machzah shekel is full of impurities. It's not the matbeh shel eish. Al daiti de Rav, according to Rav, within Rabbi Meir, shlosha kalbonos eden. There are actually 3 kalbonos. According to Tanakam, he only paid 2 kalbonos. Also, Rabbi Yirmiyah came together with Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchok, and they said in the name of Rav that according to Rabbi Meir, shlosha kalbonos eden, echad shekel shu nosein, the echad shekel shu notel, the echad l'dvar Torah. And now we get back to the Mishnah of ha'achim shechilku, and then they became chazu and they became shutfim again. When the Mishnah says ha'achim ve'hashutfim, he points out that there's a different gears over here. Ha'achim ve'hashutfim. What do we have? We have ha'achim ve'hashutfim. And there's another girsa that has ha'achim hashutfim without ve'hashutfim. If you take out the vav, then we're talking about one case. Achim who, after splitting, dividing the Yerusha, the inheritance, they became shutfim. Ha'achim v'hashutfim shechayovim b'kalbon p'turim mimaiser behem. So we have a din, and it's kishacholku v'nishtatfu. V'chazu v'nishtatfu. So originally they divvied up the estate, as we said before, and then they reestablished their partnership on the Yerusha. And therefore, they have the status of all shutfim who are part of Meiser Sheni, Meiser Behema, and they chai b'kalbon for each one of them, because each one has his own individual chiyuv of Machzis HaShekel. And now the Mishnah adds another point. We have a reverse situation, as we discussed earlier, and that's b'shaloch. So if the Yerusha remains in what's called the Tfusas Habayis, in the hands or the possession of the father, the late father, then he in effect is paying out of pocket for his son's obligation of Machzah Shekel. There's no Chiyuv Kalba. But on the other hand, there's no Shutfis over here, and therefore they are Chayiv and Meiser Behem. Rabbi Elazar says that this din, that Achim she Shutfim shechilku v'chazu nishtatu p'turim mimaiser behema, that only applies when there's some sort of barter and exchange that is mutually agreed upon by the brothers. For example, let's say in the flock, in the estate, there were G'diyim and Tyoshim, right? G'diyim are young goats and Tyoshim are young sheep. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Forget about sheep. That's I was in Australia, but no. What it means is they have izim teirim. Those are called gedim, and izim, the goats that grow up, they're called tiashim, tayash. Now, according to the strict law of Yerusha, each brother has chelik in both the tiashim and in the gedim. But you know what? They decided to divide it the following way. You know what? You give up your portion in the gedim. I'll take all the gedim. We'll figure out the monetary value on the market, and you'll get all the tiashim. So there's some sort of a barter exchange between them. Because again, as I said earlier, the initial halacha of the estate is that every single brother, every heir, gets a part of everything. So heim shechalku g'dayim k'neged tiashim, tiashim k'neged gedim. And therefore, there's some sort of exchange as a kinyan where one Yorish is being makne his chelik to another Yorish. And here we say that there's a p'tur of Maisa Behema B'din Lo Kuach. The Torah says that if there's a purchase, then the Vlad that's born after that purchase is patur from Maisa Behema. If each brother got his chelik in the gedim, his chelik in the tiyashim, so every gedi and every tayich was divided equally amongst the brothers. In that case, hu chelka mishar rishona. Now we know which was the chelik that from the initial Yerusha was designated yamak for you, and that's called yesh brera. So the clarification of the original ownership through the death of the father Yerusha is now clarified l'mafre retroactively, and therefore there was never a lakuach situation. So they're not potter from Meiser Behema, and in such a case, it's a din Yerusha, not a din of Kinyan, so there's no p'tur of Lokeach. When they now establish after the Chalukah, Chazru v'nishtatfu, they go back to the Shutvis, then Ein Havlada sheyesh lo b'shas Chalukah p'tur midin Lokeach. V'chein k'shechazru v'nishtatfu Havlada ein p'tur mishum Shutvis. If we're going to apply Yesh Brera, then there's no Shutvis. Well, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rabbi Elazar. Now, filu cholku gediyim neged gediyim, tyoshim neged tyoshim, kilkuchos hein upturim in amas. In other words, Yerusha is always, by definition, a lokeach situation, lokuach situation. The ptur is a ptur of lokuach. And by the way, any vlados that will be born later on, that's already a ptur of shutvis, because chazu v'nishtatfu. And Rabbi Yochanan proves his point from a Mishnah in Bechoros. If somebody purchases behemos or he receives them as a gift, he's potter from Ma'aser Behema. And the Chachamim derive this from a pasuk. It says, "B'char banecha titen li, kein ta'asel l'sharcha u'letzonecha." So in the same pasuk, it says both banecha and sharcha v'tzonecha. Ma banech lo shaykh bahem din bechora b'lekicha u'b'matana shari etzlo noldu. Kach gam sharcha v'tzonecha inoig bahem din bechora b'lakuach u'b'matana. Now, just introduce for 2 minutes the next sugya. The Mishnah says with regard to achim shutfim that there are situations in which they're chayiv b'masa and potem midkablan, or the opposite. The Gemara now wants to analyze scenarios in which they be chayiv in both kalbon and meiser behema, or they're both p'turim for both kalbon and meiser behema. And that's going to be the discussion here of Rab Chia Omar Rab Yirmiyah boy. Rab Yirmiyah raised the following question with regard to Achim et Shutfim. that we have all these scenarios in which the chayv and my strain potem and kablan, or the reverse, lama le non amrina, lama less non amrin. Why didn't the Mishnah bring another two possible variable combinations of pomim shem chayovim bozeh u bozeh? They'll be chay both in kablan and a meiser behema, and on the top of the Dafayim and Aleph, upa'amim shehem pturim mizeh mizeh. And there's scenarios, another scenario in which they're posted from both meiser behema and kalb. So blineda tomorrow we will analyze another two scenarios which emerge from the statement of Rabbi Chia, in which the halacha is consistent both with regard to kalbon and with regard to meiser behema. Okay, then. So this is where we'll stop for today. So have a great day and a good B'dikas Chametz.